welcome to the Untitled One Piece trading card game podcast episode that we're releasing on the Masters of Modern / the MMcast YouTube channel. I'm your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host Luke. You are welcome. Introduce yourselves to the people at large.
Hey guys, my name's Luke Avellana. I am a One Piece player predominantly. I've been playing since super pre-release back in October, something like that of last year. I think maybe more like August, something like that. Anyway, I've been playing One Piece since it's super alpha, week 1, day 1. And I'm super accustomed with a lot of other TCGs as well. So yeah.
So for those who are joining for the first time, and you must be because this is kind of the first time this will exist, we're debating on starting a One Piece podcast, and this is the pilot episode. And what we want to do here is explain what the One Piece TCG is. If you know me or you follow me on all of the different social media platforms that exist, I am very obviously a massive One Piece fan, and I'm super excited about just the property in general. And have been playing a lot of the TCG recently. And Luke, we work together. We're talking about, recording kind of an intro because right now there's not a lot of great One Piece content. And the first thing we wanted to do is kind of just more of like what is the card game? How does it play? How does it differ from something like Magic? Which I think just for this YouTube channel is going to be a helpful touch point. And so go through kind of what the card game is. And yeah, as far as my accolades, what's kind of nice is I've been an avid collector since that one. Mm-hmm. I got to play at Gen Con launch, so I was one of the first people to play it in the US, at least. And it's a very fun game. It plays somewhat similar to Magic, and excited to kind of explain what the rules differences are and how it plays out as kind of a starting touch point. And then the plan is to go over each of the different colors. Mm-hmm. So there's 6 colors in the game, and kind of how the rollout has gone. If you have been paying attention to TCG circles at all, this last weekend they just had this big tournament. It didn't go as well as they'd hoped from a TO perspective, which I also want to Luke does a lot of TO organization in Southern California, so another accolade. And it was kind of a fascinating moment where it's like, oh, okay, Bandai's been paying attention to this game really hard. This is the year of One Piece. So interesting time to kind of jump in and talk about it. And for those who don't know even beyond that what One Piece is an anime. It is I believe the most sold piece of fiction ever by one writer. Yeah. There are 1,070 odd chapters. It has sold more copies, more books than Harry Potter has worldwide. Mm-hmm. It has sold more comic book issues than any comic book character other than Superman. I believe Superman is currently the only one that beat Batman, I think 5 years ago.
That's kind of crazy that Superman's still there.
It has 1,000 plus episodes of the anime, and is about a guy who just wants to become king of the pirates, and the crew that he finds along the way, and the shady world government / other shady pirates that they have to defeat along the way as well.
Yeah, I think that's the best way you can summarize that, really.
There was a Netflix live action that came out. And so then Bandai, who in a series of different license-based trading card games, came up with the One Piece game around 2 years ago now. I think Gen Con 2022 was when they did the first preview for it. The first set launched end of 2022. And then we are now at set 5 in the US and set 6 in Japan is launched. And that's kind of the first thing to talk about as far as differences between something like the One Piece TCG versus the Magic or Pokemon, or actually Pokemon is exactly this way, but Magic is very different, where sets will release in Japan and then 3 months later they get released in the United States. So fascinating feature of that is that the metagame, I already know what the deck metagame is going to look like in 3 months. Obviously that changes over time, and technology, in the same way that Magic does, gets figured out and a new deck gets good, or the metagame becomes all one style deck, and so then different decks get better. But then I also, like, from a finance perspective, like, I know, like, cards will spike now that are not playable for 3 months, or cards will start going down in price because they know that, like, oh, the red-green law decks aren't good in set 6. So unless you have the cards already, no one's going to buy them anymore because they're going to get worse, which has an interesting facet on kind of collecting. But I want to get, and maybe why don't you start, like, how do you play this game? What is like the basis for how to play?
Yeah. Let me see if I can go into my Judge 1 spiel, demo deck spiel. One Piece is a trading card game in which two captains, you and your opponent, are controlling one leader card. So this plays a lot like EDH, Commander, things like that. I'll try not to tie that in too much, but you each control one commander. Every commander has a color. Your deck is now native to that color. So if you have a red leader, say you have Monkey D. Luffy as your leader, he's a red type character. Your deck is then restricted to only red cards. So on and so forth. You gain Dawn as your resource, and you have a life resource that once you hit your opponent's life and break all of it away, this could range from numbers anywhere between 6 to 3, with the newest leader being 2, which is very interesting. Once you chip away all of their life, you go in for one final hit to take the game. And the best thing about this game is that during each attack, during each sequence, your opponent has a chance to rebuttal. You have like a chance to either counter out of this or like play an event card to help you boost your characters up, or you can choose characters to block this attack. A lot of this game relies on the back and forth and interactivity of players kind of duking it out. It actually feels the best way to describe it is like a anime fight in which like two characters are punching each other and you kind of see their fists like going back and forth until one just breaks through. So that would be my best analogy for One Piece.
And from like a comparison to Magic perspective, it has in the evolution of Commander becoming the most popular way to play Magic, and many games have adopted that technology, right? So it is Commander focused. Each player has a main character that they are playing as that, but in versus Magic, where you have that in a command zone that you cast it later. In the One Piece game, it starts in play, and also when you are attacking other players, you actually attack characters individually. So similar to Hearthstone, where you would attack each of your opponent's characters, and they would have blocker characters that could only need to be attacked first before you can attack the other characters. But that includes your leader, where just attacking the leader is how you attack a player, not necessarily you don't attack a player and then you can block with characters in the way. And so, as we mentioned, so you have your character that you're attacking or being attacked. They can also attack. So you start with a creature in play at the beginning. Most of those characters have around 5,000 health, which was mentioned before, which is like kind of the base number that you have to do damage to be able to cause a permanent damage. And different than Magic, but much more similar to Pokemon, you have a set amount of life cards. And those are cards at the beginning of the game that are set aside from the top of your deck. And when you take damage as a catch-up mechanic, which I believe is the opposite of how Pokemon works, you then get those cards. So every damage you take, you draw a card from your prize pool. And then when you have none left and then take an additional damage, you lose. So and then the leader cards dictate how many of those you have. And classically, if you are one color, you have 5 prize cards. If you're a 2-color character, you have 1 less, right?
Yes,
4?
Correct. 4.
Yeah. And there are different colors, and we'll get into the different color mechanics and like how they interact with that feature of the game. And each, like Magic, every facet of the game has a color that's best at interacting with it, which we'll kind of get into. The other thing is Dawn, which is the other big change. So instead of having a resource mechanic inside the deck, kind of similar to Hearthstone, there's a separate stack of resources called Dawn. Which is the, like, if you ever watch an anime, it's the onomatopoeia behind people. It's the big punch text behind different moments.
It's the wham of Dawn, like,
it's what Dawn is in where the word comes from. But in this, it's your mana pool. And player 1 gets 1 in play at the start, and player 2 gets 2. And then from every turn from that point onward, you add 2 to your Dawn pool from your deck. Eventually you can, there's only 10 in the deck. So once you have 10 in play, that's the maximum that you can get. Different classes, different colors, as we mentioned, will like interact with that mechanic in individual ways, which is interesting that we can get to. But so basically, the tempo is like 1 drops let you play 2 1-drops off of 2 mana, or 1 drop off of 1 mana. Then 2 drops you get the 2 mana 4, 2 Dawn 4. There's 3 drops, 4 drops, 5 drops. But then depending on which deck you're playing and what characters you're playing, like the key moments evolve differently. And similar to like if you did, you
have different mana curves and different tempo curves and different things to do on play. The other thing about that is that you can use Dawn to also simultaneously equip like instead of spending Dawn to play a character or play an event, you can also use it to like equip onto characters that exist on your board, and they make your swings like taller or wider. There's a lot of really, really cool like strategical pivotal moments that you can do with Dawn as both a spending resource and as like a pumping resource, which is actually one of my favorite things that Bandai's done.
In Magic terms, everything has fire breathing. Like literally every land has the ability to tap 4 mana or pump target creature you control for 1 or 1,000 in this game, but 1,000 is ostensibly one power.
Yes, 1 power, yeah.
And 1 power / toughness. And so since every creature has fire breathing and all of your land offer the fire breathing ability, there's a lot of counterplay on like, your land is never dead. You never flood out necessarily because your leader always exists and you can always put mana into it. Obviously, the more resources one person has, the better. There are other characters that also like you attach Dawn to them to be able to use their abilities. So it's different than other kind of things where you would like just tap it and have something happen. You literally physically put the Dawn underneath it, but that is different than fire breathing a character with it.
We call it equipping. Which is
so they don't get the power toughness boost if you equip Dawn to a character, but you can use them to activate abilities, which is more comparable to Pokemon. And in many ways, this game kind of plays like if Pokemon and Magic and Hearthstone had a child.
Yeah.
And so because all your characters have fire breathing, because you're able to go through each of these combat steps, the other side of that is many characters cards when they're in your hand have the ability to be pitched for free. You can discard them to give also power and toughness boosts basically to characters you control.
Yes.
So if my lands can make my attack bigger when I'm attacking, and then the cards in my hand can be used to do the same kind of effect on the opposite end on the defensive side.
Yes. And strategically, that's really, really cool because, when it's your opponent's turn, you have something to do. You have something to think about. You can think about also taking life. A lot of people will think of taking life, like a lot of first timers when they play this game, they'll think of taking life as like a detriment. They're like, oh no, I'm losing the game because of how many life I have in compared to my opponents. But a lot of experienced players will be like, I can safely take 2 life, and that counts as 2 card draw, actually. That's adding like more cards in my hand. That's more counters in my hand, more plays that I can have for the next turn. It's a really, really cool strategic facet of the game that I really, really enjoy. Which is like, and it's a lot different than Pokemon, because in Pokemon, it's like you are rewarded in that way for taking out opponents. But here, it's as Alex said, it's a catch-up mechanic, and it's actually so fun.
It offers like 2 facets. One is like there are really key power and toughness boosting that each player needs to be keeping in mind at all times, because that in general, when people are able to discard a card from their hand, it's 1,000 or 2,000 benefits. Like that I know of, there's very few cards that have a bigger boost from a discard effect from your hand. There are some spells that do or events, but there aren't characters that do. And on the reverse end, that means that when you are pumping your character with your Dawn, when you're using your mana to do that fire breathing effect on your attack, you want to be doing that with in mind that depending on how many cards your opponent has in hand, likely they have the ability to just automatically pump 1,000, 2,000. So instead of wasting attack, you can pump ahead of time expecting that difference.
And I can talk about all the pumping sweet spots, all of those types of sequencing, nitty gritty stuff later on once we get a little bit further along.
I think that's for future episodes.
Yeah.
So we did mention card types. So there are 3 types of cards. Or 4 types. I guess there's 5 types of cards that you in a pack. There's Dawn, which exists in your Dawn deck. There's Leaders, which you get 1 of at the start of the game. They're free. There are alternate art versions of them that are all worth like $100 per them, but there are the standardized versions that are like in packs similar to token cards that like just are easy to get your hands on.
Yes.
And then there's creatures or characters, which are every character that you recognize from the show. Multiple, the main characters have like 30 different versions of them in the game, kind of like Jace or Chandra do in Magic. And they can be leaders and characters in your deck. And they have a library of abilities. And definitely one of the first things to wrap my head around when jumping into the game was like trying to keep track of like the 5 different Luffys that existed. And then there's event cards, which are basically instants and sorceries. For the most part, they're much more reactive, and instead of like straight up removal for characters or other different effects that you might expect, they're just like pump spells that cantrip depending on what's happening. Or the best ones are that. And then there's location cards.
Stage cards.
Which I have actually never both played with nor seen a stage card. So I'm gonna have to I'm gonna let you kind of explain what they do.
So stage cards are ostensibly like a lot of leaders are sub-faction locked. So you will have Straw Hat Pirates, you'll have Animal Kingdom Pirates or Whitebeard Pirates, something like that. And every single one, or almost every single one, has a stage card associated with that. And they generally are like, hey, if you have an Animal Kingdom Pirates leader, you may tap this stage card and then gain 1 Dawn rested. So some of them are for ramp, some of them are for character pumping. There is one stage card that was so busted that it is permanently banned from play. It is for Whitebeard Pirates. It plus 2,000s your entire field. Every Whitebeard Pirate that you have, including your leader, gains plus 2,000. And it's really, really, really difficult to deal with. So, they just outright banned it. Well, makes sense. But the thing about stage cards is that they are there is no way to interact or remove them, really. There's only one card that does it, and it's not a good card, so we don't think about it that much. And the only stage cards that are actually worth playing, because stage cards don't have the anatomy of other cards where you can ditch them for plus 1,000 counter or plus 2,000 counter. They usually are dead draws in your hand if you have more than one, and it's really only beneficial to play one stage card given any game. In short, we don't talk about them unless you're Animal Kingdom Pirates and you need to play Onigashima, right? There's only one that really uses it, but yeah.
So it's an interesting situation where they aren't good enough where they're common, and because they're not good enough where they're common, the different ways they interact with them, which is limited anyways, is not very good to play at the moment. And then on top of that, if they do get too good because of that secondary feature where you don't have ways to interact with them that are very profitable in the format, you then can't get rid of it, which means it's banned. is the circle of life for that. It'll be interesting if they ever become more of a feature of the game, because I do think they're an interesting design space. And like even up to the point of like giving one an ability to discard it for counter purposes, which is the discarding card to pump on your characters, or having a reason to have multiple in a play at the same time. But there's definitely design space they haven't typed into very well there that it is interesting to see where they would go in the long run. So those are the main 5 types of cards in the game. I don't think I missed any.
I think I want to touch on one part of the card anatomy that I think we forgot about. In life, some certain cards will have an ability called Trigger. Trigger means if you pull it from life, you are able to instantly use the trigger effect for that card. There is a color that will let you play, like if it is a character with Trigger, it will be like, hey, you can play this card if you discard one card from your hand, which is generally good. Because that means on the backswing, you're able to you have like +1 character on your board to like swing back with. So it's really, really, really fun mechanic. People would argue that it's not a fun mechanic. I'll talk about that later.
No, I mean, I think that's like a good. Yeah, that's it's not a card necessarily, but it's a special ability, kind of like the counter ability. So like if in some ways, in the way that like in Magic there's sorceries and instants, this format has the 5 main card types, and then very special divisions of like characters where there's blocker characters, regular characters, and then characters with counter. And all 3 of those are like very defining features of those cards that drastically change like what type of card that is and how it plays within the game. And then on top of that, there's this event mechanic, which characters and so events can have the trigger ability, where that if you take damage, you then get a free effect when revealing it from your damage deck, your prize pool. And there are decks that are just built around manipulating that. The both blue and yellow do things in blue does it or yellow does it on purpose, and then blue has a very specific deck that is taking advantage of it. And I think 2 different characters kind of take advantage of it. That we'll touch about when we get in the colors, which is going to be our next thing. So we've talked about combat, which I guess the last thing is you do attack characters individually, but you can only attack. So blocker characters have to be attacked directly always, right? And they can be attacked when they're untapped or activated.
Actually, blocker characters are actually, they don't get to choose to be basically the battle anatomy, right, is that if a card is rested, if a character card is rested, which means tapped, right, a card taps by either their effects or they've swung the previous turn, anything like that. That character is now open for any sort of attack coming in. So you can attack that character as many times as you want to, or as many times as an attack will go, like get countered or what have you, right?
And on that, attacking happens not synchronously. There's no attack step.
Yes.
Each character, you attack with one character, and then you can do a bunch of stuff, and then you can attack with the next character, and then you can do a bunch of stuff, and then you can attack with the other character. Or you can just be like, I attack with this character, I attack with the next one, I attack with the next one. There's no like moment that all of the attacking and blocking happens.
Yes. It's a huge nebulous main phase, which is good and bad. I don't think there's ever been any cons for that. Like, I mean, there's only been cons for it being a giant main phase in terms of like proper sequencing, and again, that's nitty gritty like technical stuff.
I think the big not con there, but the big difference is that blocking has to be done with intention and cards specifically meant to do that defensive play. Not that you're not playing with those cards, but you don't. We can get into that in a second, but don't. You have to play card. You have to discard cards to block, right? You have to play characters that are meant to be blockers versus. In Magic, where like all your creatures block, right?
Yes,
but that has a little bit different. But continue with
So
how blocking works.
Yeah. So you would probably you would declare an attack with your character against your opponent, who would have a blocker and a leader. Your leader is always open for attack, despite whether or not they've been tapped before. So you would be like, okay, I'm going to swing with my Zoro character. And then they're like, oh, hold on a second. I'm going to block that swing with my Trafalgar Law character. And depending on if you beat that power or not. So Zoro has a power of 5 at 5,000. And Trafalgar Law has a power of 6,000. If Trafalgar Law blocks that and you don't exceed his 6 or match his 6, then he stays on board and his block is successful. If you match
your Zoro that attacked also stays on board. There's
correct.
not like a blowback on damage.
Nope.
Yeah. But it is now rested and open to being attacked on your opponent's next turn.
Correct. Yeah. And then there are sneaky ways to get around all that. So that's how blockers activate and function.
So a blocker needs to. Does a blocker need to rest itself to force a block? Or
correct? Yes. Okay. Once you've declared a blocker, you then have to rest or tap the card. And then
so even if it's like Law is the blocker, and if they're being attacked by Zoro and they rest to block, now Zoro does their damage, bounces off. But if you had a second Zoro, the Zoro can now just hit the character. Well, it can hit the loop. I'm going to say
the leader.
Is the leader. Yeah. Whoever the leader is, it can hit the leader card, and because the blocker is now resting, can't get in the way. They can also attack the now tapped blocker, because once a card is rested, it opens itself up to be attacked directly the same way as a leader.
Exactly.
Now, I believe this is how it works. If I say attack with my Zoro, who's a 5,000 against your blocker Law, who's a 6,000, and you rest it and I attack it, and then I have a second Zoro and I attack your blocker Law, my 5,000 doesn't combine with the previous 5,000 that was used to attack to create like a 10,000 total damage dealt to. There's no damage that lasts on the character.
Correct.
If I can't still do 6,000, I just bump into it. Now, it's rested. I have my Zoro. I'm attacking. I can use my Dawn to pump my Zoro now to be 6,000 to then do enough damage to kill the Law that's been rested or go over it.
Yes.
But
or your opponent could rebuttal that. Speed. Yeah. Yep. And
then you have to do that before you attack as well. So you can't like attack, blocker law decides the block, and then you spend Dawn to fire breathe.
Yeah.
You have to decide you're putting the Dawn, the pumping ability onto the character before attacking.
It's a lot like equipping artifacts, I believe. I think Lightning Greaves is a 0 equip, right? Like
it's closest to just your lands have tap. Target creature gets +1/+1. Tap, target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. You can only activate this as a sorcery.
Yeah.
It's basically what it is.
Somewhat. In One Piece, we have to actually physically put the Dawn underneath. So I mean, like, we denote that it is like spent in a way that
because there are characters that care about, because the Dawn stays underneath your character until your next turn. There are characters that care about how much Dawn has been attached to them.
Yes.
Separate from if you attach Dawn to activate an ability.
Yes, correct. Eustace Kid is one of these characters. So,
which is a fun, which I would say is a complaint I have with this game. I don't think, I think that any version of Dawn being under a character should be the same thing versus the fact that it technically functions in two different ways.
Yeah. So I guess.
So you've now tapped your blocker. Yeah. I've attacked your blocker with my second Zoro. I pumped it with my Dawn, and I've now made it big enough to kill that Zoro or that Trafalgar Law blocker.
Yes.
I now have a third character who could then go and attack your leader.
Yes.
I don't have enough Dawn, so I'm not going to pump it. It's a third Zoro. I just have all of the Zoros in the world. Well, you can only have up to 5 characters in play in addition to your leader, but that I still haven't ran out of spots.
Yes.
My Zoro is attacking, and at that point, your leader is a 5,000 toughness. My Zoro is a 5,000 power. Yeah. You have no cards in hand because I'm just making that roll up, and now I've done a damage, and so then you draw a card.
And then I draw a life. Yeah, I draw a life, and maybe it's a trigger card. Maybe it's not a trigger card. Maybe, maybe it just goes to my hand.
That is the role, like, or the option is you do have cards in your hand and you play, you discard a counter. So my third Zoro still does not do damage to you. And then even if I have a fourth Zoro and I attack, that process starts over. The damage doesn't build up once again, even on the leader card.
Yes, correct.
So that's like the guts of combat for the most part. The other thing is card advantage I wanted to talk about and how it's pretty card advantage and creature removal are both very specifically limited in this game. Most removal in the format is Necrotals or Flame Tongue Kavus for Magic players, but just basically creature enters the battlefield and then kills another creature that fits the criteria. Most often it's has a converted mana cost or converted. What I don't know what it's called in One Piece. It's Dawn mana cost. Value.
Yes, yeah.
Dawn cost less than or equal to or whatever a specific number. So it'll be like this is a 5-drop character comes into play and then destroys any other character that has a 3 Dawn cost or below, and then that's a removal spell. Or it's anything with a toughness boost of 1,000, or it's very specifically focused on that. There's very few spells that are just like destroy target character from your hand that cost some amount. The other side is card advantage, which most of the card advantage of the game is cantrip based or engine based. There are a few. One of the more powerful cards is a card called Bonnie. She taps to then reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and you put a supernova character, like a creature type based character. Almost all of these types of cards are kindred typal based. So you're looking for, Nami, which is one of the better cards in the game, is a 1-drop that looks at the top, 1-drop 2,000 character that looks at the top 5 cards of the library, and you put a straw hat from your deck into your hand, and it ends up there's a lot of straw hats in this game. Almost They're a popular group of people.
Almost every single subtype has a searcher for that type. So that seems to be a big part of this game is searching for and this is like something that it shares in common with Pokemon, where it becomes kind of like a game of solitaire where you kind of try to search out your pieces and then try, but unlike Pokemon, you can't just slam all your pieces down and be like, okay, cool, and now I wait for my killing blow, right? At this time, like, you have to like actually set it up. You have to plan it like strategically. Like, okay, if I do this character goes out. He might counter me. He might not counter me. Like, and if that happens, then my threads all of a sudden spread into 4 different types of threads, which is really fun part of this game, really.
Well, like to explain card, to give an understanding of how much of a drought card advantage was in this format. One of the best cards printed in set 3, the third set ever, was Divination, which was 3 Dawn draw 2 cards. And
Yeah.
on top of that, they're like one of the better decks, consistent performing decks in the format is, and it has kind of merfolk vibes to some extent in Magic, is Nami, who is for Magic players, a Thassa's Orc or a Laboratory Maniac is your leader. When your deck runs out of cards, instead of losing the game, you win the game. And the deck is almost entirely effect cards that are just like, your character gets plus 2,000, draw a card.
Yep.
Or draw 2 cards. And it's not because the pumping matters. It's because the only good spells that draw cards are pump spells.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the deck would be playing, draw 4, draw 3 if that existed. But like literally there's like 5 mana spells you're playing that like just do plus 200 or 2,000 and you can't trip.
It's
and
funny that you bring up
those.
Nami, actually, because there's actually a card that is in my face right now. It is a character card. Her name is Kaya. She's a 1-drop, 2,000k blocker on play. Draw 2 cards and then trash 2 cards. And it's literally just
bonkers.
Tutoring yourself.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that is a like classic, like that card would be very good at Magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there was a 1 mana 0/3 that when it entered the battlefield, you drew 2 cards and discard 2 cards, it would see play in every format in Magic and would maybe be banned in a few of them.
Yeah.
Like the 1 mana to do that. So like that makes sense to me why that card is good.
Yeah. You run it as a 4 of, and then, but the fun thing about Nami is that like a Nami player, like you have to run so many games with that character just to be able to play your own like mind game solitaire, like, right, because it's so much of it is card counting and making sure that you draw this thing. You have cards that set up your next 5 cards and you're like, okay, my next 5 turns look like this, based off of whatever else I get from my life. So that type of like play, even though like Nami is bonkers in terms of like cards draw and like in terms of like being able to defend herself and stay alive, because that's her only means of offense, is to play her own game, right? So and she's a character that like wants to take damage because a lot of her life cards are her best card draw spells. Mm-hmm.
Is there, like, she has her best card draw in her damage pool and needs to get punched in the face to be able to use those to draw cards to get through more of the deck. The other, I mean, this is more specifically on this deck. We probably want to start doing episodes like on individual things, but to your point, one of the reasons I think this deck isn't a more tournament successful deck is more due to the difficulty of playing than it is due to it not being as good as some of the other decks that do more consistently well.
And on top of that, it's just like the statistical, like the actual numbers of you being able to play this deck that like correctly for 8 rounds is statistically against you as well.
So like you're not allowed to take notes in tournament plays, is my understanding, and
correct.
So people will like set their Dawn deck down in a way that allows them to like remember what order of cards they've put, because there are cards that'll let you put cards on the bottom of your deck, and because you are going to draw into the bottom of your deck as part of the game plan, knowing the order of cards you've placed cards on the bottom of your deck is super relevant. So you have to keep track of that. And that does get us in a little bit actually to deck construction, which I do want to get into. So,
let's talk about colors.
So the first step is you need to pick a leader. That leader is a bunch of some of the most iconic characters in the game. They often have synergies built into them. They have abilities on them. One we mentioned was Nami. She's mono blue. She's only blue, which means that you can only have blue cards in your deck. She and then has like unique ability that you want to build around. They like in Magic are like commanders, where you have that kind of color focus as well as character focus and ability focus that kind of dictate how your deck is going to play. There are some that are just generically good, and you're just playing them because they're the best thing to be able to combine those 2 colors. There is not that many good blue yellow leaders at the moment, so you just are probably playing with Queen if you want to play with that, versus red, where there are 17 different options for single color ones, and so you are very specifically picking a character based on the abilities they have and the interactions they have with the cards you have and that interaction with the metagame.
And unlike Magic, where like when you think of like a color, you think of immediately like, oh, red is like aggro or like, you know, burning or anything like that. It the red color archetype in our game in One Piece feels more like, okay, this is just a type, and these are cards that could be doing XYZ that fit their type of like color typing, but it really all revolves around the leader, because the leader will dictate your style of play. For instance, Zoro, if you attach one Dawn onto him, every character on your field goes up to plus 1,000 on your turn. Meaning you're gonna go, oh, I'm gonna play a bunch of white, like basically white weenies. You play a bunch of rush weenies, and then you swing for a lot of small hits. Yeah. You swing for like a lot of small hits, and then hopefully you pick at their life, you pick at their hand, and then by the end game you go, okay, and now I'm going to swing tall. As opposed to Whitebeard, who is like, I am swinging tall. I am a 6,000 power leader, the only one of my class, or actually, one of two of my class. With 6 life, I take 1 life at the end of every single, like at the end of my turn. I take 1 life and put it into my hand. Because in the anime he's he's a sickly old guy who's slowly dying. So
this is his last battle.
Yeah.
So
so yeah, and his entire thing is like, I must wall myself up. I have to have defensive, but I am also swinging very, very hard, and I may not have as many rush weenies as all the other red decks, but we're gonna hit you hard.
But to that point, and you know, red does. I would almost say of almost all of the colors, red feels the most like Magic's analogous color, where it is about attacking. It is the attacking you're doing is fast. It's about kind of lowering your resource build in the future to try and end the game quicker at this exact moment. Other colors kind of have some analogous combos that we'll get into, or there'll be some like they won't have anything, but red does have the most red feeling. Now, one thing I will say in the color conversation in general is that colors don't have the same personality test vibes that Magic's does. Like, you are not a red purple, like a character isn't a red purple character, right? They're Luffy has literally shown up, I believe, at this point as a leader as a mono black leader, as a red purple leader, as a purple leader, as a red leader, as a green red leader. And is there a blue Luffy leader?
There is a blue Luffy leader. Yes, it is a special promo. Yeah. Luffy has every type except for, I believe, green.
Yellow?
Straight green. He has a yellow. It's coming out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. There's a yellow coming out. There's no mono green Luffy. And obviously Luffy's the main character, so he's going to spread out. But there are multiple characters that have like multiple positions. There's a yellow black Big Mom, and there's a mono yellow Big Mom. Nami will show up in a ton of red cards, but then there's her leader card is mono blue. Some of it is built on personality, where the mono blue Nami is supposed to represent her like first arc saga Nami, versus the red ones, which are more future Nami cards, where she becomes like a weather wizard that can shoot lightning at people. But like, there is a little bit of that where it is meant to show different moments from the show that these characters are interacting with. But for the most part, colors are much more about mechanical identity and like what they're trying to do, and less about the flavor and the philosophy of that color. Red isn't about fire magic. Now, the one fire guy.
One fire guy.
The 2 fire guys in the show are both red, except for there's the lava guy who's blue black.
Yeah, he's blue black. Yeah.
And it's more about like, and ostensibly which characters or which colors are more about like that set has a theme for that color from a story perspective, and then they'll show up there. So it, you know, if the set in that set has purple is the Beast Pirates, Kaido and the Beast Pirates are going to show up in purple, but then in the next set, black is showing like the prison characters, and Luffy's one of the prison characters, so he's going to show up in black there. And then so it definitely does like rotate depending on what arc they're covering within that set.
Which I feel like they do it so successfully in this game, is that like they have arcs in these stories, and basically the deck that you're playing is trying to tell you that story. Like I said, like with Whitebeard, his entire character is that he's like slowly dying, but he's the strongest pirate that is known in that generation. So Like his entire thing is that he's dying, he's dying, he's dying, he's dying. But then at his final moment, like when he hits one life, and when he hits one life, ideally you're at a 10 Dawn play, so you could play your strongest card for that subtype, which is Whitebeard himself again, and then his effect is like you stop taking life, like damage from your own card effects, and then your character is plus 2,000 until the end of your next turn. So
and that's been one of the really interesting things to watch as this card game has kind of been birthed from scratch in the last year and a half in how they've rolled out colors and how those colors have functioned. Because one of the most interesting things about OP5, which is the most recent set, One Piece Set 5, is it's the first set that has come out that wasn't introducing a color. Because in the first set that was released, 2 of the colors were missing. There are 6 colors. There's green, purple, black, blue, yellow, and red. And in the first set, there was no yellow and black. It was just green, purple, blue, red. That's what the first base starter decks were based out of. That's what the packs were made out of. And then the next set that came out introduced black cards for the first time. So then now you had 5 colors. And then the third set, OP03, added yellow. And then that was focused on the Big Mom Pirate. So then the first 3 sets added a color as they were going. And so OP4 and OP5, I guess I was wrong. OP4 did this too, are the first 2 sets that really started like building on color combos that existed in the past as new archetype. Like you're now, it's no longer like block constructed, right? Like in the first set, black, red, or blue, red, green, and purple all kind of got their identity. They got a deck, and the deck was basically like out of the can. This is the deck you're supposed to build. Here are the leader cards. Each of the leader cards literally have the set is made out of cards we expect you to play for with these characters. That's what every card in the set is built to be built for one of these decks. The next set was added. Here's a bunch of black. Here's enough black cards to do that for black. There's 2 characters, and here's like the decks are already built for you. It's like if you want to just build, if you bought Rivals of Ixalan, or not Rivals of Ixalan, if you bought Lost Caverns of Ixalan and you just wanted to build a deck out of only cards from that set, and you were playing like block constructed, but just one standard set, you're basically playing the limited archetypes, but with like more rare. And that's kind of what the set rolled out. But then over the last 2 sets, the metagame has really evolved because you're no longer spending 30% of a set just injecting a new color, right? Like when OP03 and OP04 came out and OP02 came out, it was about introducing black, yellow, and then supplementable colors for black and yellow, so black and yellow could catch up to the other 4 colors. OP05 was the first one where it's like, here's stuff for everyone, and here's a bunch of new cool things that characters are doing, and here's a new way to look at it. Which has been an interesting, and every set that comes out kind of has that same evolution. It's like, okay, now you're no longer building decks out of just the most recent set and the cards that are built for it. You're taking an amalgamation. And that's also something that I think like metagame wise is going to evolve over time as you watch it, which is like,
which we're actually seeing it right now in set 5 is like, every single set has been doing this really, really cool thing for players who are like, I have never played OP01. I don't have any of the cards from OP01, but I would love to get into One Piece. Let me get into, if you can find it. Anyway, I would love to get into One Piece. How do I get in here? And it's like, I drew NL. I have this leader, this NL leader, right? And he has the Sky Warriors archetype. And every other card that is yellow for that deck actually exists. So you could actually just, like take all of the Sky Leaders and then you put them into that that deck and it plays just as is. And then if you wanted to iterate, you take all the cards from set 3 and then you're like, okay, I jam it in here and it works. So I think that's also something like really, really clever and like cool and really welcoming.
They've been building the colors to be pretty versatile amongst themselves, and because of that, it does mean like as we get more characters, more leaders, more cards printed, and even like looking back at old leaders, there's going to be tools and pieces and setups that differentiate how those decks are played that people aren't thinking of yet, right? And then that can kind of build off of each other in really interesting ways. I do want to get, because we're at now 45 minutes in, so I do want to get through the other colors. So we talked about red. Let's go to the next one. Green. What is green about in the One Piece TCG?
Green is all about resting characters, tapping down other characters, and then setting up big blockers. That's basically what they do. A lot of them is also unresting your own characters so that you could have more swings than the prescribed 6 that you're able to do. Yeah, I think that's them in a nutshell.
Right. So for
Sometimes they'll
instance,
like be able to call each other out and things like that.
yeah,
But
well, one of the best decks from the very beginning, and one of the decks that I've played from the beginning, and ironically, that and Nami were my first two decks, and they're both considered two of the more complicated decks to play in the game, which has been a nice onboarding process,
mm-hmm.
is Red Green Law. And Red Green Law
Yes.
has the ability of, if you have 5 characters in play, you may tap Dawn and to return one of the characters in play to your hand, and then play a character of a certain mana value or less and put it into play. And the way he does that is he uses tappers and untappers to reuse that ability to use those characters to draw cards, to tap a character to draw cards, return that character to your hand, play another character down of the other color to then trigger to draw cards. So it's like it has birthing pod red black scam in modern esque
Mm-hmm.
play patterns where you're like searching for characters, you're building a value engine, you're outvaluing your
Yeah.
opponent. It has one of the few like consistent card draw engines in the game.
It is the most complicated deck.
Yeah, but like literally at every moment you have 17 different lines of play you can go through because all of your things are like, oh, I can tap and return 3 cards into my hand to tutor for 4 cards, that then I can play those cards. Half of them have haste, so then I can attack this turn with them, to then return them, put it back into play, attack again.
Yep. And then you would
and that doesn't even
return all of those back to your hand, and then you would set up another wall, and then repeat the process.
So green is very much about like ETB tapping and untapping, resting and unresting characters.
There's
All
a
right.
lot of
So
ETB in this game.
yes. Next is purple.
Purple is all about ramping. You want to outvalue your opponent using Dawn. A lot of them then also go on to use that Dawn as a Dawn minus mechanic. It is the only color in the game to have a Dawn minus mechanic. But the Dawn minus ability it will set you back in terms of like resources, but there are other ways to like catch up with that. There will be other cards that are like, hey, if you Dawn minus and I see you Dawn minusing, hey, why don't you go ahead and get another Dawn for free? Just to make it so that effect never happened. And the Dawn minus ability will be like, hey, blow up 2 characters with the cost of 5 and 3, or something like that. Or hey, Dawn minus 7, I'm a big guy who comes out, I gain rush or haste. And on top of that, I also blow up a 6 cost. It's all about ramping high, getting to 10 Dawn before your opponent. A lot of the current purple has actually been a color that has been recently worked on. So a lot of the top tier decks are purple because they can get to 10 Dawn basically on turn 3. Which, and to put that in perspective, it would take you around turn 5 to get to 10 Dawn, depending if you go first or second. Which means you get to drop these huge bodies on board and out, like basically pressure your opponent into like responding to that dead on.
It plays a lot like what black green, right? Where it's ramping into discard effects, mana denial effects, creature removal on creatures that enter the battlefield. Like it has the black color pie of like how it messes with your opponents. But then has the green, but is doing that in a green way in the sense that all these cards are expensive, and so you're playing with ramp cards that help you build your mana. And because your deck is kind of this separated, guaranteed thing, it also cycles through it. So it lets you. It's as if it, in many ways, it feels like the Gitrog basically, where it's I'm adding lands from my Dawn pool into play, and then I can use those lands by sacrificing them to get special effects. But because all of my effects get me more those lands back from my graveyard, which is both my hand and graveyard of Dawn, I can kind of cycle through getting that Dawn back every turn for free, while also taking advantage of it to play big spells, play 10 drops, or be able to like pay a 5-drop that then says discard 2 Dawn to have your opponent discard 2 Dawn. But because they don't have that ramp effect, that puts them much farther behind than
yes. Magellan is a hell of a card.
All right, next color. Let's talk about we're just going to continue in the land of blue.
Yeah, so blue is your card vantage engine, tutor engine. Look at your top 5 of your deck, set them up. It is like your most strategic. It's supposed to be your most strategical color. It also
So
has
it's the same.
yeah. It is the same.
Blue and red are the same. Yeah.
It is also the only color that bounces characters. So you bounce the hand or bounce the bottom of the deck, which is the strongest removal. It is the only deck to have a get rid of any character card. It is the hey, I am going to send this card, your 10 cost card. I don't care. I'm going to send that to the bottom of your deck. That type of like shenanigans. A lot of blues like ways of playing are to effectively control opponent board and then bounce everything to their hand, bounce everything to the bottom, watch them run out of resources and mana or dawn, and then just go in when you know the time is right. So yeah, just like blue in Magic the Gathering. So
yeah. It I mean, as we mentioned, like Nami is a mono blue laboratory maniac leader that plays a bunch of cantrip spells, card draw spells, bounce spells, and characters that when they attack let you mill yourself to win the game through the laboratory maniac mechanic. But the other blue characters are when they combine Crocodile, which is a blue purple card. Mm-hmm. He's like a triggers off of effects. Like that's also where that kind of effect, the Izzity play of anytime you play an effect card, get a benefit from it, or return effect cards from your discard back to your hand. That's a blue mechanic space that I believe is pretty much primarily just blue, correct? Mm-hmm. Like that's not really something other colors are doing.
No, not really.
And as effect cards get stronger, that will become more of a relevant part of my identity as well. Yeah. All right, the next color, black.
Okay, so remember how subtyples can sometimes go into other like colors, like say Straw Hats can be blue, Straw Hats can be red, Straw Hats can. I think that's it actually. But black cards are primarily Navy cards. They are all Navy cards. All the other Navy cards are usually black, except for the newest set, they are blue. And the entire identity of black is that yes, one, they are the Navy. Two, they are the only means of like character removal based off of cost. They also do something where they reduce cost. So cost reduction in this game doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to reduce cost of something in my hand and play it for less. It's actually character on board costs 10 cost. I'm going to reduce that cost by 4, so then I can use this effect that kills cost 6 characters. So yeah, it's like a different way to interact with other cards like Anatomy.
We mentioned earlier that like a lot of the removal in the game is creature enters the battlefield and then gets rid of something with a mana cost of X or less. And so what black is able to do is kind of like using like a -2/-2 mechanic that black and Magic would use to lower those converted mana costs to then be able to use those removal spells in a way that is not how they were like balanced intentionally, right? It lets you kind of be tricky in how you do it. It also is a card that lets you play out of the graveyard, right? It is the one that lets you kind of do in and stuff out of your discard pile, which is the only one. Like
it is the only one.
Each of them gets to play with a specific zone. Red is the one playing with the attack zone. Blue is playing with the deck, the library itself. Purple is playing with your land. Black is playing with your discard pile, and green is playing with like your characters in play to be able to use their abilities. And then yellow, which we'll get to, is playing with your life pile.
And there will be instances where cards in different colors can do some of the same. Like Uta is a 4 cost who can bring a 3 cost from your graveyard into your hand. Yeah. Like they can do it, but they're not ever going to be as good as the other color at it. Yeah. So yeah.
It's like a standard color pie balance. Just what each color does is definitely a different vibe. The other thing that black is really good at is like using your hand for value, right? It lets you scrap cards from your hand for benefits.
Yes, correct. Yeah, you could a lot of black is like they'll let you tutor, but then you have to toss out the other 2 other cards. You can search one and then you will toss the others out into your graveyard. Which is sometimes better because you're like, oh, I can play things from discard pile onto field. Basically that's all black does.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense that they each have like their like area of expertise. And the last one, which is yellow, and yellow's big thing is messing with your life card pile, your little treasure cards on the side.
Yes, life manipulation is one of my favorite ways to play. I came into this game from Digimon, which was the precursor to One Piece. They work with a lot of the same systems, and it was called security manipulation. And this one here is life manipulation. A lot of cards are like, hey, go ahead and take a look at your life card on the top, and you can place it on the top or you can keep it on the bottom. A lot of your cards are triggers that will allow you to play that character from life. So the idea is that you set up your own life in a way that produces all these trigger effects, or you get lucky and they have a bunch of trigger effects in there already, and then you fight your opponent in an uninteractive way, kind of the same way with black, how it's uninteractive to manipulate your own costs of characters. Life is a way that it's hard to play around. A lot of players will always think of like, oh, I have to play around a person's life in case there are triggers in there, but the triggers are face down and unknown to both players until you play yellow. In which case, now all of a sudden you're being tricky about it. There's a lot of division in the community about this color, but there is data to say that like even though this is a strong thing, it's not the best thing, right? Which is, I feel like everybody's trading card game discourse can boil down to that. So yeah, but yes, it's all about life manipulation. There will be cards that are like, hey, I can choose to. I will make my opponent choose this. You can trash your own life, or you can give me one life, and I can heal one life. Which is an effect native to yellow, which is that they can heal their own life and abilities.
Yeah, I think they're the only one that has the ability to heal, really.
Yes,
or as a major mechanic, and yeah, so weirdly, they're yellow black in Magic terms, right? They're manipulating their life total. Now it's yellow black with a side of blue in the sense that like your life total is a card draw engine and one of the few consistent sources of card advantage in the game, while also allowing you to drain your opponent. So then, in a way that gives them some kind of card advantage, but then letting you draw cards off of what they're doing, or use that to kill them, right? You're manipulating your life total while you're lowering their life total as the game goes on. While that's happening, still playing a regular game, right? Your characters are still ending play. They're still able to attack their life total. You're still pressuring them from both ends. But that definitely is the main space that they're interacting with the mechanics of the game.
And then you start combining all these different types and what they do together, and that's when you get your dual color leaders. And that the way we balance out dual color leaders in this game is normal monocolor leaders will have 5 life. Dual color leaders will start with 1 less life. They will have 4. And that is
unless there's something special, right? Like, because like Vivi has 5 life, but she can't attack.
But she can't attack. Right? Yes, and Rebecca has the same idea. Which are very interesting things because you're always down 1 attacker off of your opponent. These are really, really fun, like strategical things to think about that may set you apart, but give you advantages in other spaces. Because I think
for like the plan for future episodes of this podcast, be it monthly or whatever that we end up doing it, is to like do some deck dives, right? We'll start talking about individual characters and we'll have guests on. I'm gonna eventually convince Krim to jump on this podcast to talk about Sakazuki or Zell talking about. I think he was playing Katakuri ? At the event last weekend, and he made day 2.
Nice, let's go.
Yeah, he went X2. Like the only reason he didn't make the top cut is because of they removed the final round. He was like in line, and then it became a lock as long as he won his next match to a 50-50 coin flip that he just lost the coin flip on.
Oh, do I know that? Don't I know that?
On that note, have you read the scans for this week?
I have actually.
Okay, cool. All right, sweet.
Crazy.
So the way I want this podcast to work is this. So now we are done with the TCG section of the podcast. So if you like this, please hit that like and subscribe button. Please share with your friends. It's something new that we're trying. If you have friends who like this game or have thought about wanting to get into the One Piece TCG, please share this video with them. If you're buying cards or you want to buy these, we have a TCG player affiliate link down below. So please use that affiliate link to be able to find those cards. And we obviously have a Patreon that you can go to as well to make it helps pay the editor. All of that money literally just goes to the editing team. And then money out of my own pocket. So definitely appreciated. But the way I want this to work is the first section of it and the majority of it be talking about the card game itself, but then the last 20 minutes just talking about whatever the chapter that came out that week. So this is chapter,
oh my god, 1066, something like that.
What is it? Open on my phone. I had it open on my phone.
1106.
Chapter 1106. Chapter 1106. Yeah. By the time this podcast episode comes out, I believe actually we might be a week behind because we have our 2 sets, Murders at Karlov Manor set review coming out this week and next week. So I think we'll be already at 107. So this will be a little bit dated by the time this comes out, or maybe
next
this
week
comes out
is
the Friday.
hiatus week, so
is there a hiatus next week?
Yeah, hiatus next week. So maybe it'll be
okay.
It'll be
So
fine.
this is still relevant. We're speculating for a long time.
Let's go.
Another break. All right. So 1106. If you haven't read the chapter, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and come back next week or when we talk about more One Piece TCG.
Yeah.
Hit that subscribe, but spoilers for sure, especially if you're an anime only. So a lot of shit went down.
Oh man, I'm so hyped.
How is Oda just one-upping himself consistently every week, just, on and on? It's
so
this
crazy.
year has been wild.
Yeah. So here's my question for you. Who did you think was going to show up?
And this is gonna we don't have any proof of me calling it. I actually thought it was gonna be Giants. I think my number 1 pick was Giants. I thought it was maybe gonna be Saul over Dory and Brogy, but I definitely wasn't like convinced which giant it wasn't going to be. I didn't think it was going to be the Straw Hat Grand Fleet because this isn't their moment. This doesn't feel like they don't feel like the correct escalation of what's going on here, and they're not really relevant to the story of what's going on. I didn't think everyone who's like it's the Revolutionary Army is like the timing doesn't make sense. Like only one if one of them has a teleport ability we didn't know about beyond Kuma's teleport ability, then maybe, but there's no way the timing made sense. They're all the way on the other side of the paradise. There's no way. Like Blackbeard didn't make sense to me because they already shown that Blackbeard's like there already, and it would be weird for it to be a follow up there. It didn't make sense for it to be Law because like Law's like injured riding Beppo, and even Beppo in Sulong form, I don't think can take on the boats.
No.
There was like a chance in my head. Like I don't think it was going to be Shanks. I think Shanks is boring, but I think this is Shanks. This is the version of Shanks, right? That's kind of what got me here, right? I was like, it's none of these things. I think the only other idea I had it could be is like maybe it's Katakuri and or like the Big Mom Pirates because they like
seeking revenge or something.
Looking for Pudding, and Pudding could be on the Blackbeard ship that we saw earlier, right? Like there is a little bit of that possibility, but I was like, I think it's gonna be. Like they set up Saul earlier in the arc. They feel like the right escalation of what's going on. It's still hype though. Like the fact the boys are back.
It's hype. It's hype. I had a bunch of friends who were speculating that it was going to be Geen actually, and they said that it was going to be Geen and the rest of the oh my gosh, what's his name?
The Baradia.
Yes, yeah. Because So hear me out. Hear me out. I'm speaking on behalf of like my friends in the Joy Boys Discord channel, locals at EK here. That's my plug. They one of the guys said, I think it's gonna be Geen because specifically Mike said this in case Mike listens to this. Mike, you said this. Okay. Geen. They said that Geen was talking to Sanji saying, hey, I'm gonna see you in the Grand Line. I'll see you in the New World. And then they thought that like, they're probably going to pull the same trick that they did where they stole like a Navy ship and then started firing on other Navy ships. And then use that as like the way to get in there. But then I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, Geen's going to need such a glow up. Like, it's not, I'll see Geen. I'm like, that's cool. But like, I wouldn't be as hype as I am for Dory and Brogy.
Yeah. Like, first off, my understanding is that it's a running meme that anytime there's a mysterious character that could show up, Geen is the people is on the list because he's like by far the most forgotten character.
Yeah.
I'm like convinced Geen is like dead. Like because like he's like poisoned, right? Like, he's like poisoned at the end. He's like, I'm going to see you in the Grand Line, and then he dies.
He crumples over and like dies. Yeah.
I think like. I mean, the distance between Geen's the last time the Straw Hat saw him versus the last time the Straw Hat saw Dory and Brogy is like 20 chapters. Like Egghead Island is a longer arc, as short as it's been so far, than the time between us seeing those two characters last. Yeah. So like, it's not as that crazy.
Yeah, it's not that crazy.
We did Dory and Brogy on Elbath like,
my
3 chapters
favorite
ago,
Krieg moment, like my favorite Krieg fate has got to be the live action. So in my head, that's what happened. So we're fine.
I would also say another thing that puts the nail in the coffin, like the live action to me, like is like the definitive these characters will never matter again.
I
Lock
agree.
for characters,
the
right?
intent of them. Yeah.
The only one, and the creators literally said it. The is not octopus guy.
Not Hachi.
Hachi.
Yeah. Okay.
He's the one character that was excluded from the live action that isn't excluded due to the fact that if they do get to the point where he's relevant again, like
that's an easy write.
They would remove him. It was literally just they ran out of money. They were like,
oh, okay.
The fight to they choreographed the fight. They had it set up. They're like, to make an 8-armed person work is taking so many resources from what we're doing here and so much time that if we could do these other 3 things that we want to do, or we can do this one thing, choose. And they chose the 3 other things.
That makes sense,
We don't know what those 3 other things are, but like they put the budget in other places.
Gotta be that Mr. Nine
literally like the interviewers, the showrunner was like, the one thing I regret is not getting Hachi in here and not figuring out a way, because he's the one character. But like Gan literally has a half line scene, right? Like he like runs into the kitchen and they're like, here's some food. And he's like, thanks, buddy. And then you never see him.
You never see him again.
Don Creed's the same way. Like I don't think Mary is ever going to be relevant again. The butler.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Because he dies in live action. That's a sign that he's not going to matter ever again.
Rest in peace, Mary. But yes.
Yes.
So definitely wasn't going to be the Dawn Creek Pirates over there with Dorian Brooke. Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, like obviously hindsight, and like I don't get the shot call it. Like if this was a running weekly podcast, I could have shot call it last week. But I definitely my like main guess was Saul. Which is one of the giants, and then that led me to being like, if it is someone from Elbath, it's some version of giants. That seems like the most likely thing, especially with like they fit the themes of the story better. They're a buildup of Kuma, because Kuma is part giant. Yep. They're a buildup of what the big giant robot that we also saw turn back on now that Luffy's powers are turned back on. So there's a lot of things to me that seem relevant there, and also even information on like why the world government's relationship with the giants is going to be really interesting. The giants also showing up on the island, because this is the Egghead Island incident, right? Like we already know in hindsight that this is going to be a famous big moment, and obviously Dr. Vegapunk dying, which we saw him get stabbed in this chapter, is a part of that. But I think like in a skirmish, Dr. Vegapunk was killed is not like
I don't think that's
incident that's news. 2 giants rolling up and declaring war on the world government, which killed one of the Gorosei, as the Gorosei killed as Straw Hat Luffy killed I think like this becomes a declaration of war between Elbath and the world government versus like just Dr. Vegapunk dies because a Gorosei kills him.
Yeah. I actually don't think Vegapunk's dead yet, because I was looking at it and then I'm like, okay, where did he get stabbed? He got stabbed on the right side. I'm like, okay, my heart's on the left. All right, yeah, he's probably okay, but like he'll say one dying thing and then he'll die, right? Like
I don't think Vegapunk Stella is making it off this island alive. I don't think he's making it through the next 5 chapters fully alive. I do think Wrath or Lilith could make it off. I like my prediction. If I'm a betting man, one of those 2 survives. I don't know which one. I don't think both of them do.
It's got to be Lilith. I know it's Lilith because of the waifu bait, but like
maybe, but like she's the evil one. But I do think,
which would make sense that she lives. Like she's not gonna be evil,
The other one's like a child giant. Like I think there's opportunity, and I think it could be both of them, right? They could be the 2 that just straight up survive. I also think the traitor one survives.
Oh yeah,
I think like one of the ramifications of the end of this arc is that the world government does gain full access to the Mother Flame. Right? Like the giants might destroy all the ships. They stop the
Buster Call.
The Buster Call. Robin gets to get her 3rd Buster Call. She's got 3 punch cards. She gets her 4th Buster Call free.
Poor Robin, really. Like, which is why I didn't want it to be Saul. I didn't want it to be Saul because of that.
Yeah, Saul going through another Buster call is a lot, but I think I don't know. Yeah, I think like I think Vegabug's done for. I'm interested to see what happens to Kuma and Bonnie. Bonnie getting the ability to control all the pacifistas is like a big
that's
deal.
so pog. It's so pog. The reason I didn't think that they had like one more Bonnie stab left, but then they did that. I'm like, oh, you got it in. You got it in. You got me again.
I'm sad again.
Yeah.
You've once again made me bleed my own tears.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like it does in a weird way to me make it less likely for Bonnie to become a Straw Hat. Like, do you think Bonnie will become a Straw Hat now?
No, I don't think Bonnie was ever destined to be a Straw Hat. I'm gonna be real. I think she was like gonna be like a Straw Hat fleet adjacent, you know? Like I imagine my vision of the end of One Piece is that we're gonna get like a freaking end game, right? We're gonna get an end game moment where all the Straw Hat fleet shows up. Carrot's gonna be there. Freaking, all of them are gonna be there. And then Bonnie's gonna be there with 100,000 pacifistas, you know. So
right, like I think before this I was on board with because Luffy said he wants 10 people. Like there's always this like conversation, like, is there one more Straw Hat? Because does he have 10 people on his crew, or there are 10 people with him on the crew? Because there's 10 now, but will there be an additional one? And obviously Yamato was one that for literally all of Onigashima district was like a potential candidate that still might join at some point. I'm a big proponent that Vivi is going to rejoin the Straw Hats based on what's going on, and has always been the 10th Straw Hat as like the diplomat. But one thing that the Straw Hats don't have that Roger did have is 2 kids. Because they have Chopper, they don't have a second kid. And if you add Bonnie, you now have your Buggy and you have your Shanks, and then that makes Chopper Buggy, I guess. And as definitely Bonnie is inheriting the will of Nika more than Chopper is. That's the one that's my one. That's the one good argument I've heard for Bonnie. Right? Is like
I really like that. I like that like Bonnie shows up as like their cabin boy basically, and like because so much of One Piece is about like carrying on to the next generation. I think like that character is like integral to witnessing what's going to happen in this generation and being like I have to do it better, or like I have to carry on that will, right?
Especially because Momonosuke has been aged up to an adult. Bonnie is now the one real like kid that could be a part of the adventure. So that is why. But her getting an entire army of pacifistas makes her feel like she's just like another Grand Fleet member who's just gonna have a like sick army and live with Wrath and Lilith somewhere on Elbath maybe, or some other island that they escape to. Or like Kuma bloops them back to the Revolutionary Army, and that gives the Revolutionary Army a pacifista army, right? Like there's ways to piece that together that makes sense to me, that makes it feel less likely that she joins the Straw Hats. Now that being said, sick moment, loved it, big fan.
What's up?
We got like 15 minutes in. Any other thoughts on the chapter?
On this chapter? Okay, so like I'm one of those people who reads the spoiler scans, and I'm like a huge like I read the like, oh, this is what happens to this panel, like and lately they've just been like a little bit not trustworthy, just because like they'll conflate things, like Sanji blocked a shot, and then like you kind of look at the art and you're like I guess
Sanji tried to block a shot and then got fully blasted.
And the thing is, like, I'm a Sanji truther, so like I there's all these like arguments online about power scaling and whatever. I'm not here for that. It's about like the journey, whatever. I'm about the story. But like I'm waiting for Sanji to pop off. It'll happen, I think. That's an unpopular opinion, but it'll happen.
I will say this was a moment I was hoping Sanji would be able, like, I wish he did block it, because I think this was a moment that he could do it. I do think Barcelino is such a fascinating, has become one of my favorite characters in this arc, just adjacently, and just in the last 3 chapters, because of like the struggle he's facing. And he's still on the other side. Like, at what point, at what call does...
I think it's when Vegapunk dies. I think that's what happened.
I think Vegapunk's dead. Like
I think I
he
think
was
we're
willing
gonna.
to kill Bonnie and Kuma.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe he like acted slow, knowing that Luffy was like out there with the one shot
Yeah.
to take him back out of the fight. But
People were thinking people were theorizing that like Luffy got all that food because Borsalino gave it to him because there was a shot
yes,
where the ramen bowl that he was previously eating was left next to him.
well, not even just that. It's the scene where Luffy just ends up by the food vending machine.
Yeah.
There's like a shot on Barcelino who's like looking weird at something, and then it shows Luffy has disappeared,
Mhm.
and then shows Luffy at the vending machine, and then shows him being like Kizaru's just like, where'd he go? I
Yeah.
don't it was like very weird to flash to him twice.
Yeah.
And like in some ways I feel like does the world government have something on him? Right?
I
Like
think
what
I,
because
I,
he obviously is struggling with
mhm.
this.
I think what it is that like Borsalino's brand, like because all the admirals have a brand of justice, right? Like Sakazuki's absolute justice, and I think his was lazy justice, or was
No,
that
that's Kuzan.
Kuzan? That was
Kuzan is
Kuzan.
lazy does. Yeah.
What was his? I forgot. I
It's
think
like
it was
unknown
somewhere.
justice. We actually
Unknown
we
justice.
don't know
Yeah.
his. I mean, like they're all based on stereotypes of like worker, like
Mhm.
office, like
Office
stereotypical
workers,
Japanese
right.
office workers, right? And he's like meant to be the like I'm just doing what I'm told, cog in the system type of guy. And I think that's like a little bit of what it is.
Yeah.
But they've Oda's done so much to set up conflict for him in this moment, and every
Yeah.
moment we see him, he's dealing with that. So I do wonder in like there's definitely a play of like he's just straight up he's a psychopath, he's there to murder people, he's a bad guy. There's a second version where he like is like everything he's doing is like slightly slower than a person made out of light maybe would do it, right? He like
Mhm.
has a conversation with Boney and Kuma, be like, I'm gonna kill you at the same time. I
Mhm.
hope no one stops me as I go really
Yeah.
slowly.
Unclear justice is what his brand is apparently. So you were right.
Yeah,
Unclear.
okay,
Yeah.
unclear. Yeah.
Like that. So yeah, to make my point previously, I think like what he's doing is his brand of justice, where he's like it's murky for him. He's like he's not committing to one side, but in his head, he's like it's justice to not kill these people, but I can't not because I'm still part of the system that I'm a part of. So
Right.
like I think that's what it is. And I think like if Saturn dies before anything, Kizaru will just have like a moment where he's just like Kizaru is Borsalino, whatever they have Japanese names and like Italian names. I don't know.
No. So okay. So Borsalino is his real name.
Okay.
Kizaru
Kizaru is his code name.
All of the admirals are given all the admirals, and then the admiral
Vice admirals
in waiting, not vice admirals, but
okay.
they're like the next in line, which there's only two of them, and they were like fan creations that then Oda made canon. So like debatable if those two exist, but all of them have a like given name from the world government that's one of the 12 or the 13 Japanese or Chinese zodiac.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And we're missing some of them, but so we have he's the monkey, he's yellow monkey, red dog for
Garb? No, different guy.
No, the main guy.
Sakazuki.
Sakazuki is red dog.
Yeah.
Blue pheasant is for Kuzan.
Mm-hmm.
Kuzan means blue pheasant.
Yeah.
And then purple tiger is the blind guy that I'm forgetting the name of. Green bull.
Yeah, Isho.
Yeah, green bull is
green bull.
A green bull.
I forgot all about this. I think I could just brush up on Jackie Chan Adventures and I'll remember.
Yeah. And then two of them. The two is I think pig and rabbit are the two that like are the fake characters that aren't like pink rabbit and brown boar or something like that are the two like not real characters. And so people assume that Son Goku is golden goat or golden ram, or maybe white ram, white goat, like one or the other. Mm-hmm. And then we don't know what
hanging out with a
we don't know what the other ones are. And there's a lot of like arguments that like Kobe could be the next one. Like when you're talking about the next generation, if there will be admirals, like the ones that exist, what like animals would they be, or are one is one of them going to be a dragon, blah 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 blah. Which we've now gone into admiral naming conventions, but
but Kizaru being like super conflicted about everything is interesting, and I really he's my favorite admiral. So I hope he makes it off alive. I'll be honest. I hope he doesn't
Oh,
get buster called and die. So
I
I
think
think.
he will. I think both him and Saturn survive.
Mm,
I
mm,
think that the like world government's like the centralization of the power of the world government has been so reduced that they need those power players. Now, the one
mhm,
argument for the Gorosei not making it out
mhm.
is
That there are five
that
others.
every other big bad has had 4 lieutenants
Yeah.
and a 5th one that dies right beforehand. Where so like an
Mhm.
example is like Doflamingo
Right.
has the 4 spade pirates, but then the guy with the meat on his face all the time
Mhm.
dies
Mhm.
before the main arc. If you look at it's 3 and 1. If you
Right,
look
right.
at the Beast Pirates, Kaido had Jack,
Jack.
Queen, and King, but he also had Joker, who was
Yeah.
Doflamingo, and Doflamingo was removed before that arc started, and so he only had Jack, Queen, and
Jack.
King. And
Okay.
so like
Yeah.
you have like it's a consistent thing where like one of them is removed early, and so that
Mhm.
could be Saturn. Saturn could just Emu's got his 5 guys,
Yeah.
and one of them gets ixed, so that there's
Yeah,
now
yeah.
the standard 4, and then you have the 4 for the top commanders of the Straw Hats to fight, and then Luffy beats one of them and then beats the main one.
Thing is, I think Saturn has to die. Like he has to. Like we have to see that happen to just so that we know that like yeah, it's something that can happen, or like this is how it happens, or like
Yeah,
it has to be such a world event. Like you said earlier, it has to be like such a huge world event that
the
ignites everything.
Giants kill a Gorosei is a world
Mhm.
event.
Yes, yeah, and it has to happen. So I'm thinking it's gonna happen. I'm just hoping that Kizaru gets out of there alive, or he basically is the he's somebody who gets to fight Kuzan, or like be part of like this triad of admirals fighting each other between Akainu, Kuzan, and Borsalino somehow. That's what I'm thinking about. Like that's what I'm thinking is gonna happen. Like there's gonna be like this side battle when the Straw Hat Grand Fleet comes in. Like there's gonna be like this battle over here that's happening kind of like in Alabasta where like these two warring sides are like hitting each other,
Right.
and then yeah. So I think that they're gonna be part of that side conflict drama. So
I don't disagree. I think Kuzan gets out, and there's a debate on if he gets out as a good guy or a bad guy.
yeah.
Not Kuzan, sorry, Kizaru. The other thing with Saturn is you kind of need him to die here. You don't need him to die, but it's maybe a beneficial thing for him to die here, because if he doesn't, I feel like it becomes a lot harder to give similar evil character development to the other 4 Gorosei and
Mm,
Emu if like he's so set up as the main Gorosei that I hate at the moment that if
mm.
he's still alive, I can't imagine the other 5 comparing.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I
what
get
could
what you
they
mean.
do? Now, there's stuff, right? There's a quite a bit of flashbacks to go through on like the Void period
Mhm.
and what happened to Joy Boy, not to mention what happens to Shanks, not to mention what happened.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff that each of them could be a part of. I think I like thought about it and was able to like that could be a future episode on like
Yeah.
what each Gorosei's like flashback character that they could be attached to that they can go through.
Mhm.
Roxy Zebek is another one, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so in. I need to see what happened at God Valley. I don't know.
yeah,
Like,
Dragon's another one, right? Like, Dragon could involve one of the Gorosei. Shanks could. Roxy Zebek could. The Void Sentry could. There's definitely still characters to kind of go see and see like what their backstories are that we haven't
yep.
that they could be involved in that are at Kuma's level. But yeah, Kuma definitely is what Saturn has done to Kuma is going to be really hard to top for any of the other
Mhm.
ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, basically, the world government at large is like responsible for all like ostensibly the entire suffering of the world and like the entire like amnesia of the world. So that's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be like a whole thing that like I'm super super excited to hear about. So
Really, you want to know what happened in the Void Century, and you want to start a crew and maybe get some poneglyphs and
oh man. Yeah. Just travel across the equator because that's what the Grand Line is.
Yeah. I mean, really, the Grand Line is just the Americas and how it connects. It just cuts the Atlantic and the Pacific in half. No, I think like if you don't kill Saturn in this arc, he is more important than Emu.
Yeah, and if you don't kill Saturn in this arc, it's hard to like justify Luffy being able to fight anybody else. That is a Gorosei, right? It's like you can't scratch them. In my head, it's like you can't scratch them anymore.
But I mean, Luffy can get stronger, right? Like Luffy could go to the Giants and they can train him and feed him.
I'm hoping that's not the case.
That doubles his.
I'm hoping that's not the. I can't take another 3-year. Actually, you know what? That'd be kind of pog. If like we show,
I do. Oh yeah, another time skip. I do think we're gonna go. This is my theory earlier, which I don't think is happening anymore. Was that Luffy gets kidnapped, and like it creates kind of like the final war is like a reverse Paramount War, where it's like the next arc is actually following the Straw Hats and Vegapunk and Bonnie going to Elbath, and then going through like a training arc on Elbath for them that gets them to the point where they're strong enough with the Grand Fleet and the Revolutionary Army to go save Luffy from the Gorosei, and then Luffy like learns all this stuff. That was my like big brain Luffy becomes ace theory for the first.
Oh man, that's such that'd be a great parallel for him like being Goldie Roger even.
Right,
which is
right. But
I don't think
that's
that's how I actually think. That's actually how I think One Piece is going to end. I feel like there's going to be a Goldie Roger moment where he like ignites another generation or something.
Or
I don't know.
He takes the L.
Yeah,
he's been sacrificing his life with Gear 2 this whole time.
Dude, that shoe has to drop. That shoe has to drop because like
I don't think it is.
I
think they're
know,
just going to say like
he got better
because it's like the bull guy. It's not even a real like a expert on anything. What was his name? The like CP9 guy was like that. To do that, you must be removing some of your life force or whatever. Like, he doesn't. What does Bluno know?
Yeah, but then the other thing is that Ivankov like did like this whole entire like surgery to remove all the poison from Luffy. That he's like, it's gonna cut your life in half, and he's like, okay, because I'm dying right now. So.
Yeah, I do think that one has a higher chance of dropping, but Okay. All right. So I'm gonna run an hour and a half. So first off, thank you all for listening. If you like this, please hit the like and subscribe button. Please tell us in the comments because I need positive reinforcement that you want more One Piece content. We're also if you have a good idea for a name for this now Untitled podcast, we are open to things. And if you have anyone you want as a guest to join as a guest of the podcast, we can talk to. Let us know in the comments as well. I am your host, Alex Kess. You can find me at Kess Wiley on every social media platform out there. Luke, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at I guess my Instagram is probably the best. A Foamsmith on the on Instagram. That is spelled AFOAMSMITH like a blacksmith but with foam. That's probably the best way you can find me. I'm also on Twitter. Don't follow my Twitter.
And we should have links below as well. And big shout out to Editor for editing this podcast. That's now a whole new game that you have to figure out. And hopefully you read the scans so you don't get spoiled.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks everyone. We'll talk to you all next week.
Bye.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.